Welcome, iMacros fans, to another episode of At Whim, automating the web with iMacros. Today I want to take some time to talk about the changes to iMacros 2021 since its initial release over a year ago. Actually, it's closer to a year and a half now, and also discuss some of my experiences with using it. First, let's start out with a recap of the timeline since iMacros for 2021 was released last year. Of course, we had the initial release in May of 2021, and that was followed by the first patch, or what they're calling a hotfix, a little over 2 months after that initial release. And then there was a rather quick follow-up to that just 2 weeks later with the second hotfix release. The next two hotfixes were spread 3 months apart each, with hotfix 3 arriving in November 2021, followed by hotfix 4 in February of 2022. And since then, we've waited nearly 10 months, or the better part of this year, for any new releases until about a week ago, we were finally blessed, I guess you could say, with hotfix 5 on October 19th. So the first thing I'm wondering is, why was there such a long delay between hotfix 4 and this latest release? Especially since there's so many outstanding issues remaining in iMacros 2021. Secondly, what's the purpose of calling these hotfixes as opposed to just a regular release? We haven't seen this before in iMacros history, really. If you go and look at the version history in the wiki, you'll just see a release is a release is a release, but now we have hotfixes. So more than likely what it means is that, just as the name implies, these updates are specifically to just fix functionality that's either currently broken or was missing in the initial release, and not to introduce any new features or any sweeping changes. However, that begs the question, when might we start to see some bigger, broader changes? After all, it's been over a year, and iMacros 2021 still hasn't reached feature parity with its predecessor, iMacros 12.6. Now, I didn't start to use iMacros 2021 for any real-world projects myself until after the third hotfix was released last November. Up until that point, I was still doing most of my projects using iMacros for Chrome. And I have to admit that once I did start using iMacros 2021, I was initially pleased with the results that I was able to obtain, despite the product still feeling very much like a beta release with missing features and a less than ideal user interface design, and in some cases, a user interface that just decides not to show up for work some days. But I was willing to overlook these shortcomings as long as I could still achieve the desired results, which for the most part I could, and I did. Unfortunately, over the ensuing weeks and months, I continued to discover issue after issue, some of them relatively small, but others not so much, that just hindered iMacros at worst and made it painfully difficult to use at best. In fact, I've personally reported around 80 different issues, and that's no trivial amount. Some of these have already been fixed, as you can see by the highlighted items on the screen, but there still remains a significant number of bugs and other issues. Even if these were all small, relatively trivial issues, which trust me, they're not, the sheer number of minor problems adds up to become a much larger problem overall. So what does this all mean? What can we take away from this? Well, let me share a little personal anecdote. I recently had the opportunity to use the iMacros Classic browser for a project, so I'm talking about iMacros 12.6. And the reason I was able to use the Classic browser on this project is because the website that was being automated was a government website that wasn't very modern, nor was it too complicated. And I have to say, especially after the last couple of years of using primarily iMacros for Chrome and iMacros 2021 almost exclusively, this project was like a breath of fresh air. Everything simply worked as expected, and macro playback was smooth, reliable, and efficient. It felt like taking a calm, relaxing walk through an old familiar park on a warm, sunny day. Everything just clicked and fell into place almost effortlessly. Using iMacros 2021, on the other hand, is sort of like venturing into a dark and dense forest in the middle of a cold and rainy night at the end of October while on crutches and having no idea what strange creatures are lurking in the shadows just waiting to pounce and prevent you from reaching your destination at every step. Sure, you can stumble and fumble your way through, and if you're diligent and persevering enough, you might be able to sidestep all the obstacles and still make it through safely. But you start to ask yourself, is it even still worth it? Now, I don't mean to imply that you can't have good outcomes with iMacros 2021, because you certainly can, and I have. In fact, on another recent project, the requirements called for entering over 1,000 items into a web form, and iMacros 2021 performed exceptionally well. It was able to loop over all the data and enter in all the items in one shot, with no browser crashes and no other weird issues cropping up. Usually, when dealing with such high volumes of data, it's necessary, if not at least a good idea, to periodically restart the browser throughout the process to prevent problems. But iMacros 2021 handled it with flying colors without even needing to do any of that. However, more often than not, the amount of effort and frustration required to complete a project with iMacros 2021 makes it, well, not very much fun, if I'm being honest. And I'm speaking as an advanced, experienced iMacros user of many years. I fear that new users have little to almost no hope in having success with the tool in its current state. And even other intermediate to advanced users simply might not be willing to put in the extra time and effort that's required to achieve satisfactory results. So this is what I'm curious to learn from you today. Does the current hotfix release cadence instill any confidence that the major issues will ultimately get addressed, or do you think the writing is on the wall and iMacros is just being left to wither on the vine? And let's not even talk about the iMacros extensions. Those haven't seen any significant updates in at least a couple of years. That's another topic altogether, but also related to this. So let me ask you, is iMacros 2021 the MVP you hoped it would be, the most valuable player, providing great success in both time and cost savings that continue to outweigh your upfront costs? Or is it more of an MVP, minimally viable product that is just barely limping by? Or perhaps you've already declared iMacros 2021 DOA, dead on arrival, and have moved on or are considering moving on to something else. Regardless of whatever metaphor you prefer to use, please consider sharing your thoughts, experiences, and ideas in the comments down below. I'm dying to know what you're thinking. Maybe dying is not the best word to use in this context. Hey, this is the iMacros Guru saying thanks for stopping by the channel and checking out the video. If you found this content useful, then stick around for more tips, tricks, and inside scoop on automating the web with iMacros.